Broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California. Your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
By now, you have not only heard about the tragic events that occurred on Friday in Paris, but you have more than likely heard a great deal of commentary, and we're going to discuss it today because this is the issue that really will divide the world between those who understand the threat that Islamic militants, Islamic jihadists, extremists represent, and those who don't. We have a world that is divided between the Chamberlains and the Churchills, and the only Churchill that we seem to have in the world at this moment is François Hollande, who is the president of France. Immediately after the tragedies unfolded at a soccer stadium, at a restaurant, at other venues across France, where innocent lives were taken in the name of radical Islam, the president of France immediately vowed to bomb the enemy and did so, sent planes, dropped bombs on ISIS training camps. Meanwhile, back in the United States, we have the left, we have President Obama, we have Hillary Clinton, we have Bernie Sanders, we have Martin O'Malley, none of whom can even say the word Islamic terrorism. None of them can say Islamic militants. None of them can say Islamic jihadists. They can say, Hillary said jihadist. Obama likes to say ISIL instead of ISIS, as if somehow that's going to make a difference. Obama spent Monday, today, in Turkey at the G20 summit. I'm sorry, why is our president still in Turkey at the G20 summit and not in France, standing there with our ally and assessing the cost of not speaking the truth about evil? The bottom line is everything's changed. All this move to infiltrate country after country after country in the West with Syrian refugees, they've already discovered that at least two of the killers posed as refugees and snuck into France, pretending that they were displaced in Syria by ISIS, when in fact they were ISIS. When in fact their goal was to sneak in as wolves among the sheep. And see, then it brings into question how many of the people were actually migrants or displaced refugees, and how many of them were just terrorists? How many of them are sympathetic to the terrorists? Europe doesn't want to know. All across Europe, they're protesting. There are massive pushbacks against any Islamic immigration. You have in this country very strong reactions. Governors who have simply stated outright they don't care. They're not going to accept any more Syrian refugees at all. And that's Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Arkansas. And then in Michigan and Oklahoma, they're going to suspend the programs. You have Donald Trump, who has stated a couple things. One, I agree with him wholeheartedly. France's president is talking about changing the Constitution. He wants to strip any French citizenship from those with dual citizenship who are either terrorists or are suspected of terrorism. Then he wants to kick them out of the country. So he's asking for that change. He's already met with his Congress. You notice how François Hollande, the President Hollande of France, has taken action. Now think about when the last time this happened, what was Obama's reaction? It was to excuse and never, let's not point fingers. We don't want to blame. He never wants to be accused of Islamophobia. That's the worst thing in the world. It's okay for people to die in the name of Islam, in the name of Allah Akbar. It's okay for them to die in the name of the Prophet. But for God's sake, don't accuse me of being Islamophobic. Because I would never, the bottom line is, Obama is not an American president. Obama is someone who has a very different agenda that he has never shown to the American people. And many people thought he was Muslim. Many people have questioned his allegiance. But I just look at his actions. I have no way of knowing what his faith is. I know that at one time he went to a church that he's now disavowed with a radical preacher who hated America. It's clear Obama does hate America. And he seems to hate Western civilization. It's as if he wants revenge, and he's happy to see when the Islamic jihadists, the Islamic militants, strike, and then he refuses to just speak the truth about it and say, hey, look, this is a problem and we should do something about it. But France's president doesn't have a problem acting like a president. He doesn't have a problem acting like a leader. He comes out the gate and takes action. He bombed the living crap out of the ISIS training camps he could identify. I don't think that will be the end of the bombing that France engages in. You also have Obama, who's out there saying ISIS is not even a problem. We've contained them. Everything's fine. You know what the problem is? You've never even engaged. You've got all these Middle Eastern countries who are actually fighting terrorism, who have asked for men and materiel, who have asked for your assistance, who have asked for your participation, and you've turned a cold shoulder to them. That's the bottom line. And our president is driven by an agenda that nobody can seem to clearly understand or articulate or defend. But it seems to have spread to the entire Democrat field. Because if you cannot state the simple truth about what happened, it wasn't Catholics that went out there and bombed and shot up and took hostages. It wasn't Baptists. It wasn't Methodists. It wasn't Protestants. It was Muslims. They worship and they practice a faith called Islam. So they're Islamic jihadists because in their faith, you're allowed to kill the infidel. You're allowed to wage war. Jihad is war against the infidel. And the infidel is anyone who doesn't believe as you believe. And we're going to play for you a couple of, at least one clip, so that you can really get a feeling of how the left thinks, if you can call it thinking. We've got a clip from, of all people, Madonna. We'll get to that and a whole lot more, including the Democrat debate on Saturday. Oh, you didn't know there was one? Yes. I don't think anybody knew there was a Democrat debate. It was so boring. We're going to play you a very short clip of that, Madonna, and a whole lot more when we come back here at the Tim Donnelly Show. Hey, you may not know it, but the Democrat Party, the party of Islam, since they cannot criticize Islam, they cannot speak the truth about Islam, they cannot actually speak the truth about anything. But the Democrat Party had a debate on Saturday night, and we have a short clip that will give you some taste of just how boring it was and what you missed.
So before we begin tonight's second debate with these candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination, we ask you to join us in observing a moment of silence.
socialist compared to Eisenhower.
You'll never hear this from that immigrant-bashing carnival barker Donald Trump.
For the first time, a majority of my donors are women, 60%.
In 2008, you were portraying yourself as Annie Oakley and saying that we don't need those regulations.
This cannot be an American fight, although American leadership is essential.
I would argue that the disastrous invasion of Iraq has unraveled the region completely and led to the rise of Al-Qaeda and to ISIS.
I don't think that the United States has the bulk of the responsibility.
It's not just about getting rid of a single dictator. It is about understanding the secondary and third consequences that fall next.
That was one of the real contributions, despite all the other problems, that George W. Bush made after 9/11, when he basically said, after going to a mosque in Washington, we are not at war with Islam or Muslims. We are at war with violent extremism. If you go to 12, it would be the highest historical average we've ever had.
Yeah, but look, it should always be going up. I mean, with all due respect to Secretary Clinton, I think we need to stop taking our advice from economists on Wall Street and start taking advice.
When we talk about Wall Street,
economists.
Wall Street's a good issue to talk about.
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
The business model of Wall Street is fraud. The Affordable Care Act is a step forward. I think we all support it. I believe we got to go further. I want to end the international embarrassment of the United States of America.
The international embarrassment. That clip is an international embarrassment. Did you hear any? I know there was a little bit of an echo. We're gonna play that again later. But I think it was a reaction of the machine to such mindless drivel. Did you get any sense from those who wish to be the commander in chief that they had any understanding of what this attack represents in the world? This is the second major attack in France. France is known as one of the most tolerant countries in the world, at least in terms of being so anti-American, which somehow equates tolerance. And yet they were attacked. The innocent human life was struck down for no reason. And we're going to play you a clip later of Madonna, and I'm going to give you a sense of how the left views this, because they cannot call evil by its name. And because they can't call evil by its name, they can't fight evil. Obama was in a Muslim country today, in Turkey, not France. He didn't go to our ally. He didn't stand there with the president of France and say, we will join you in striking back against this great evil that has struck the heart of your country. It's as if he doesn't understand that this has driven a stake through the heart of Europe. This is an attack and an assault on Western civilization. It is an attack and an assault on those who wish to live free and in peace, regardless of their faith. And now is a time for all people, not just people of faith, but all people, to stand up and call it what it is. And to say that when you engage in murder, in mass murder, in the name of your religion now has no validity. And we will no longer tolerate being infiltrated by people who believe this way, because we have a choice. And Donald Trump has it right. He said, we need to consider shutting down mosques in the United States of America. He talked about how there was a campaign to monitor what they were saying in the mosques, but that all got ended by the current mayor of New York. Well, you know what? There's mosques all over this country. And if you have radical clerics who are fomenting jihadism, who are pushing their membership not to pursue their faith and live in peace and control and contain themselves and live up to whatever the requirements are of their religion. No. If they are in there pushing terrorism, pushing jihadists, pushing the radicalization of these refugees and these others, all of whom have this grudge, this 1,000-year-old grudge against the infidel, we need to shut that down. We don't have to tolerate that. We have been at war for over a decade. And now we are inviting people to come to our soil, to come into our towns, to come into our cities. We are welcoming them. And at least a handful of those who committed mass murder and in the name of terrorism, in the name of Allah in France, were refugees. There were people pretending to be refugees. So this mass migration, this mass movement that was sold to the world by the establishment and by the media as being compassionate and caring and necessary. Well, it looks like the opposite is true. Here, by being compassionate and caring, you now have almost 150 French citizens who are dead. You have over 300 who are wounded. You have mayhem. And even more than that, you have struck at the very heart and soul of a country that lies in the center of Europe that is, in many ways, the cultural representation of Western civilization. And so the question is, are we going to have leaders who engage and understand what this means? Or are we going to have those who will pander and those who will apologize and become apologists for radical Islam, who will defend it, who will deflect it, who will explain it away with words? Or do we have people who will engage and stand with our allies and ferret out this evil and wipe it off the face of the earth? Because contrary to what Madonna is going to say in the clip we're going to play later, you can't love it away. You can't understand it away. You have to literally stamp it out. Not metaphorically, but literally. Otherwise, this will happen over and over and over and over again. And I believe we will see with increasing, I believe it will increase, unfortunately, if we do not act together. Stay tuned. The Madonna, yes, that Madonna, who was in concert in Stockholm, and she gives this speech. She interrupts her concert, and I don't have an issue with her doing that. I think it was appropriate. I think a lot of what she said was appropriate, but then she launches off into invective. Well, I'll just let you hear it if we've got it ready to go.
We have been, obviously, this whole show is about celebrating life and standing up for your rights, fighting for what you believe in. Actually, I don't need my guitar for this, because it's been very hard for me to get through this show up to this point and not forget about what happened last night. So I need to take this moment to acknowledge the tragedy, the tragic killings, assassinations, and the senseless endings of precious life that occurred last night in Paris. I know it's disturbed me all day, and it's been really hard actually to get through the show, because in many ways I feel torn. Like, why am I up here dancing and having fun when people are crying over the loss of their loved ones? However, that is exactly what these people want to do. They want to shut us up. They want to silence us. And we won't let them. We will never let them. Because there is power in unity. And I do believe that as much chaos and pain and senseless violence and terrorism that occurs around this world, not just in Paris, as much as that does occur, there is more goodness in this world. We are here to prove it. And I was going to cancel my show tonight. But then I thought to myself, why should I give that to them? Why should I allow them to stop me and to stop us from enjoying freedom? All of the places where people were killed were places where people were having fun. People were enjoying themselves, eating in restaurants, dancing, singing, watching a soccer match. These are freedoms that we take for granted, of course, and we must not. But they're freedoms that we deserve. We work hard and we deserve to have fun. And there is no one in this world that should have the right to stop us from doing what we love. Another important point that I want to make is that, yes, there are people who have no respect for human life. And there are people that do atrocious, degrading, and unforgivable things to other human beings. But we will never, ever, ever change this world that we live in if we do not change ourselves. If we do not change the way we treat one another on a daily basis. Yes, the way we change the world is not to elect another president, not to kill 100 more people. The way we change the world is that we change the way we treat one another on a daily basis in the simplest ways. Okay? We must start treating every human being with dignity and respect. And this is the only thing that will change the world. This is the only thing Only love will change the world. But it's very hard to love unconditionally. And it's very hard to love that which we do not understand, or that which is different than we are. But we have to, or this will go on and on forever. Now, before we do go on,
and see, right there,
I would like to have a moment
right there,
of silence.
right there.
Where all
She
of us just
she has a moment of silence. It's very respectful. We're not going to sit through that because what she just said, this is the fallacy of the left. This is the mentality of the left. Let me just back you up for a minute. She said, if we can just treat people with dignity and respect, if we can just love everyone, and that it's difficult to love people who are different, that we don't understand. We just need to love them and understand them. And all of this will end. That is the fallacy of the left. And if you are paying attention, Madonna and those who think like her, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, Martin O'Malley, Bernie Sanders, and almost every Democrat out there, not everyone, but almost everyone that's in high elected office, they're blaming us. You are at fault for what happened in France, in case you didn't get the memo, because you don't love enough. You don't love those who are different. And so she's saying her prescription is, let's not kill another 100 people. That's not going to solve anything. Well, if you kill the right 100 people, if you kill those who are committed to mass murder, who show no regard for human life, who show no conscience whatsoever, they have no sense of right and wrong, or they have a perverted sense, which is in their warped mind, they believe that they have the holy right to declare a holy war on humanity. They believe they have the right to kill everyone, men, women, children, anyone and everyone that does not believe the way they do. You cannot reason with people who are zealously committed to holy murder. That's what it is. It is a holy, it's not a holy war, it's holy murder in the name of Allah. You can't reason with them. Now, you can put a bullet in their head, and that will stop them from killing. But for every one you kill, there's 10,000 more. So the question is, in my opinion, and I would love to get your take on this, 323-746-TALK. But the question for me is, how can you efficiently and effectively kill as many of them as possible in the shortest amount of time before they have the chance to do this again? Now, mind you, I'm not talking about killing Muslims. I'm not talking about going into mosques and committing the same kind of murder that they committed on the streets. Because, see, that's what they do. We are actually civilized. We actually have civilized rules. They're savages. The people who are committed to Islamic jihad are savages. They have no regard for any human, social, societal restrictions on your behavior. They believe that they have the right to kill in the name of their God, which, of course, makes you wonder and brings into question the validity of their entire religion when you have people killing in the name of their so-called God. It is a false religion and a false God when you believe that your faith gives you the right to murder those whose greatest crime is that they don't believe the same way you do. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with people who just had a poor childhood and are misunderstood and just need to be hugged. We're dealing with people who want to kill you and your family and your offspring, and they want to end you and your entire way of life. They want to end your religion. They want to end your country. They want to end Western civilization as a whole, and they believe they have a divine right to do it. 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls when we come back. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go straight to the phones and get your take on the tragedy in Paris. Give me your first name and city. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim. This is Eric from Ellendale.
Hi, Derek. How are you?
Pretty good, Eric.
Oh, Eric.
Yeah, all good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
So what is your comment?
About the Madonna comment. I gotta tell you, I was nodding my head with almost everything she said, and then the whole love part came up, and it's just a whole wrong attitude to defeat these guys. You gotta kill them you gotta beat them with force. You can't, like you said, you can't read these guys.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I had a quick comment. How about a compromise with Democrats and Republicans? We don't accept any middle-aged male. No one from the age of 15 to 55. No Syrian refugees. Just women and children. That'd be a fair compromise, wouldn't it?
Well, it's certainly worthy of consideration because we are a compassionate people. But I think when you don't know who is going to become a jihadist, because it's not exclusively males, even though it is largely. I think you've got to err on the side of caution because you have an obligation to protect the citizens of this country. We don't have an obligation to protect the citizens of Syria from I can't talk today. From the creation that. One thing I wrote in my notes today is ISIS is Obama's legacy. Whether he likes it or not, the creation of ISIS, the expansion of ISIS, the vacuum that was created when he pulled out and signaled to the entire world what he was going to do. And I believe by abandoning that region at just the wrong time, we have empowered this evil force that is now... They're very effectively slaughtering people all over the Middle East and Europe.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
I tend to caution and agree with you. We shouldn't accept any. But we are compassionate people, and we accept people from all over the world. And you don't know who's going to be violent. Some people do things in the name of jihad. Some people do things just because they're violent people. But I agree with you.
Well, then why? So here's my question: why take any Syrian refugees? Why don't we take refugees from other regions where they're truly in jeopardy for their lives and they pose no threat to Americans? That seems that would satiate our need to be compassionate and be part of the solution. But what's happening in Syria now is massively suspect. This just looks like a Trojan horse to introduce radical Islam and for people who will radicalize the Muslims who are there, who are now disaffected and feel outcast and everything else. This is an ongoing thing. It's not a one-time thing. But anyway, Eric, thanks for your call. It was a reasonable suggestion, but I'm not feeling reasonable today.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Enjoy the show.
Okay, you got it. Pick up another call here. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hello?
Yes. Oh, is this Dennis from Pinion Hills?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Dennis, how are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Well, I'd be a lot better if we actually had a president who was a lot more like France's leader. I didn't think I would ever say those words in my lifetime.
Well, I'll tell you, a situation like this has a tendency to wake people up and change attitudes. If you hear those guns blazing and those AK-47 cracking, it will change you for life. And as far as this whole situation goes, it's just a matter of time where they come over here and start that stuff up with us. I'll tell you what it's going to come to. We are going to have to throw out the rule book as far as constitutional rights, due process, and all that stuff. We'll have it for our citizens, but I don't think we should have it for these type of guys.
Well, yeah, be careful. Be careful, because the way you said it sounded like you want to turn our civil rights upside down. You mean you don't want to grant and afford civil rights to those who are basically enemy combatants, and I agree with you on that. But
yeah,
I don't.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I just heard a radio report a few minutes ago that France had a few of these guys on a watch list, and they had one guy that should have been checking in every day. Well, didn't check in last time around. Well, lo and behold, it's one of the guys that shot everybody up. Well, the way I look at it, when you got a guy on a watch list, especially in the climate we're living in right now, if you don't have the resources to watch this guy, which to me I think is ridiculous, when we've experienced the kind of terrorism we have, I think we are just going to have to break the rules, get tough.
Well,
you got a guy on a watch list. I think you take him for a ride in a car, and you just make him disappear. I think it's going to get to that point.
Dennis, I got to take a break, but you make some good points. We'll be back with more of your calls after these messages. Hey, this is the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. We're going to go back to the phones to get your reaction to Madonna's comments and the overall reaction to what has happened in France. Give me your first name and city. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. This is Bill Blake in Phelan, California. And I think that what Madonna said is there's kind of a societal infection today. More and more people are thinking this way. And let me tell you why I'm thinking this. Even though Fox is supposed to be a little bit more conservative, on Friday night when this was happening, I was channel surfing, and I hit my local Fox channel, the LA station down there in Hollywood, and Shepard Smith was on, and they had him as a talking head in the corner of the screen while the events were still going on in the theater in Paris. And you know what he actually said? He actually said in a very serious way, he says, "This is unprecedented in the history of the world. Nothing like this has ever happened before. It's not like some guys flying across the Atlantic, hijacking some planes and flying them into some buildings. They actually are blaming us. It's actually our fault." And I was on Rush's show earlier today because I was so taken by what Shepard Smith said. And it's the way he said it, too. It's more like it was performance art. He was more concerned about his journalism awards than what he was really saying. And this was while it was going on. And Rush didn't believe that somebody in the press, especially a more conservative Fox media, would say something like that. They actually pulled the clip on his show and they played it back. And if you can get that clip, I'd appreciate it if you would try and play it too. What he actually said while this was going on was so horrendous and so shameful to me, I couldn't believe it. We've got an infection in this country. I don't know what this is. I don't know why people are thinking this way. Something's got to be done about this.
You look that, and the something that's going to be done about it is expose it and talk about it, just like we're doing right now, because this is ludicrous. I'm sorry to cut you short, but thank you for your call. And if there's any chance you could email me that clip, is that something you have?
No, I don't actually have it. I heard it, and then Rush's people drew it again off the internet somewhere, and they replayed it on the air. But you could probably find it in a search, too.
Okay. We'll see if we can find it. I just figured you knew more specifically than I did what to look for. But at any rate, thanks for the call. We are going to go back to our guest for this segment, which is this is Sally Pipes, who is the president of the Pacific Research Institute, and she's been warning for years that Obamacare would have an extremely negative effect on co-ops, and unfortunately, it is now a reality. And Sally, my apologies for earlier. I was a little carried away with the content of what we were talking about, and when you said co-ops, you kind of threw me a little bit because I'm having you on to talk about Obamacare, which is not quite as damaging and destructive as ISIS, but close.
Well, exactly. And of course, I mean, ultimately, if we go to a single-payer Medicare for all system, 350 million Americans are going to be affected. So in a way, on the domestic front, it is a very serious issue, Obamacare, and why I really feel it needs to be repealed and replaced with a program that actually empowers doctors and patients and not the federal government.
Well, absolutely. And here's the thing. What's so destructive is this is all a lie. It was a fraud that was perpetuated on the American people because if you remember, the president said you could keep your doctor. He said illegal aliens wouldn't get Obamacare. We see California is leading front and center that charge to turn that into an even bigger lie. But the bottom line is that this is no longer a partisan issue because a huge number of Democrats in California, because something like 47% of the population is now opposed to Obamacare because it has a negative effect on small business owners, on co-ops, on nonprofits, on anybody and everybody who's trying to do the right thing winds up getting screwed by this law.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the president promised that if you like your doctor and you like your insurance company, nothing was going to change. We've seen 5 million people lose their policies a year ago. Now we are seeing that, the American people are realizing, how much their premiums are going to be up this year for coverage on the exchange, the metallic exchanges. They're not going to be up, just a couple of percent. The average increase will be 10.2%. And so premiums are up, deductibles are up. And if you're middle class and you have a deductible of about $6,000, not many people, middle class or even upper middle class people, have that kind of spare money sitting around waiting to pay. And then, of course, I think the worst thing about Obamacare is the fact that people, when they purchase a gold, a bronze, a silver, a gold, or a platinum plan, that they think that they would have the doctors at hospitals that they're used to having with the coverage that they previously had, and now they're finding out that just isn't the case, and that is very upsetting to people because your doctor, if you have a doctor and a relationship with a doctor, is very, very important to people. And you don't go to the doctor every day, but when you do go, you want to make sure your doctor and the hospital that is there, and we're finding that just isn't the case under Obamacare. So finally, the American people are waking up that this is not the plan that the president promised them, and they're very upset about it.
Yeah, and the bottom line is this is having a tremendously negative effect on, and you wrote an op-ed in the Detroit News about what it would do to co-ops, and the largest of the Affordable Care Act's 23 co-ops are, well, the fourth one has already failed. I mean, so
12 actually now, as of a week ago Friday, 12 out of the 23 had failed. The latest one,
I can't keep up. It's happening so fast.
No, you can't keep up with failure. I mean, we the taxpayers put $2.4 billion into these federal co-ops because the president said these co-ops under the Affordable Care Act, the real name for them is the consumer operated and oriented plans, and the president said that these co-ops will bring about lower prices for coverage and will bring about more competition. Well, $2.4 billion later, and the failure amount that the taxpayers are funding is about $1.4 billion, and 12 out of 23 have failed, affecting 740,000 people in this country. New York was the largest co-op to fail. 200,000 lost their coverage, and I was actually at a publishing house in New York on Friday. They're publishing my book, and they had just received a letter from the New York insurance, their co-op insurer, saying they no longer were going to be able to provide coverage. This is extremely disconcerting to people, but 740,000 people losing their insurance so far, and there are 11 more co-ops, which I think are only one co-op is actually not losing money. So I think by the end of the year, we're going to see maybe even 22 out of the 23 co-ops will have failed.
Wow. And this is the monolithic catastrophe that Nancy Pelosi had the temerity to say you must pass it before you can know what's in it. And that seems to become the operation du jour in D.C. now, with Obama trade and all kinds of other things just flying through. Budgets sail through without any opposition. It's a disaster. We're talking to Sally Pipes, who is the president of the Pacific Research Institute, and we will take a quick break. And Sally, when we come back, I want to get deeper into this, maybe take some calls and hear about this new book you're putting out as well, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. 323-746-TALK is our number. If you have a question about Obamacare, get in line. We will be right back. We're talking Obamacare with Sally Pipes, president of the Pacific Research Institute. And Sally, in your op-ed, you mentioned the New York co-op. And these co-ops have not led to lower cost, more affordable health care as promised. They have become squandering, a new way for politically connected people to squander a tremendous amount of money in the name of doing good. They're playing with house money, but unfortunately, it's your money. You say that in 2014, the New York co-op lost $78 billion in taxpayer money. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And so $78 million in taxpayer money out of a total of $2.4 billion. So, and the people in New York, at the New York Health Republic Co-op, which was the nation's largest, as I mentioned before, people have only been given like 2 weeks in order to find different coverage. And you know how difficult, you read all the time about how difficult it is for people to figure out the various types of plans that are on the exchanges, or even to go and try and find, private coverage. This is, of course, for people who, do not have employer-based coverage. And about 60% of Americans do get their coverage through their employer. But this is, the president had two main goals. One was to bring the cost curve down for healthcare, and the second was to achieve universal coverage. Neither of these goals is being achieved, and in particular, on the cost side, with people having to face, average increases in premiums this year of 10.2%. In Minnesota, the average premium increase is up by 49%. So, this is just, the president told the American people lies, and he told the American people too, in addition to saying if you didn't like your doctor or your insurance company, nothing would change. Remember, he made the promise that the average family would see their premium go down by $2,500. And the Congressional Budget Office refuted that, and he continued to say it.
Right. And the reality is that costs are going up, premiums are going up, and it's a logical thing. If you're going to give half the population a benefit they didn't previously have, meaning they were getting health care somehow. Somebody else was paying for it, in many cases us, through the emergency room, through increased costs and everything else. But now we have had our health coverage taken away. We've been forced into plans that don't make any sense. We have to buy things we don't want, and we can't buy other things we might want. But then we wind up with a really high deductible, but our neighbor across the street that might not work for a living at all has a zero deductible, and their plan is pretty much completely subsidized or largely subsidized by us.
Exactly. And, Medicaid, or here in California, Medi-Cal, the program for low-income Americans. The president keeps saying, we've got so many people insured now. Well, 12 million of these people have been added to the rolls of Medi-Cal or Medicaid. And you know what is happening there? These people that are on Medicaid or Medi-Cal cannot find doctors as a result. And so they can't find doctors. They have long waiting lists. And so what's happening is that emergency room use in this country is up by 5.6%. And remember, the president promised people that emergency room use was very expensive. We want to get away from that. But when people think they have coverage and they can't find a doctor, or the waiting time is too long, naturally they're going to go back to the emergency room. So this is what's happened under Obamacare.
If the president of the United States were running a hedge fund or a mutual fund, and if he made the same promises in the context of an investment, he would be in prison right now for the rest of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. He lied to the American people, and the American people are finally finding it out. What's interesting in the presidential debates on the Republican side, people are saying, well, there's no discussion about health care. And I think the good news is that the candidates are finally rallying around a single replacement plan, which is what they need to do. The real debate on this is going to come up when we have a candidate who is going to be up against either a Hillary Clinton or, God forbid, a Bernie Sanders, who really believes in a Canadian-style single-payer healthcare system, which I grew up under in Canada, where the average wait from seeing a primary care doctor to getting treatment by a specialist is 18.3 weeks. That's over 4 months. 18
weeks.
And so, yeah. But even Hillary Clinton, I think, when you listen to what she says about healthcare, remember back in 1993-94, Hillary Care. Well, now she's actually moving saying she's going to move Obamacare even more to the left. So we'll have Obamacare 2.0. So it's very, very important that the American people wake up and really choose a candidate and vote for a candidate who is going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Because if not, we're on the road to single payer.
I thought I detected a Canadian accent there. And I had some friends who immigrated from Yugoslavia to Canada, and because the U.S. wouldn't take them. That's our dysfunctional immigration system here. But this couple, the wife needed some sort of heart surgery or something. She needed to go to a specialist. She needed to be referred. So she was referred, but she was waiting like 4 months on a waiting list before she could be seen. So she drove across the Windsor Bridge into Detroit and saw a doctor that day in the U.S.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
And we're trying to replace our system with that one.
And where are we going to go? Because we won't have an escape valve like Canadians have. 51,000 Canadians out of a population of 35 million, a very large country with a small population. 51,000 out of 35 million come across the border every year and pay out of pocket for health care, because if they feel they have a brain tumor and they need an MRI, you don't want to be waiting 4 to 6 months. Or if you feel you have colon cancer, you don't want to be waiting for a colonoscopy for 8 months to a year. And now with the Canadian election results, with Stephen Harper being thrown out of office and Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son, Justin Trudeau, becoming the Prime Minister, I think you're going to see Canada move a lot further to the left once again.
Well, that's bad news for Canadians. You've got a book out, Sally. We've only got a minute left. Tell us the title of your book. When's it going to be out, and how can people get it?
Right. It is coming out from Encounter Books. It's a broadside. It's called The Way Out of Obamacare, and it will be available on Amazon.com. The release date is December 15th.
So The Way Out. We've got a way out. We got answers.
Yes.
The Way Out of Obamacare. Exactly. Sally Pipes. It'll be available at Amazon.com. Sally, I want to thank you for taking your time to come on and explain to us one more so-called unintended consequence of the monolithic disaster known as Obamacare.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
It's great having you on. That was Sally Pipes, who is the president of the Pacific Research Institute. She's got a book coming out, The Way Out of Obamacare. That actually, I like that title. I think everybody's looking for some kind of an answer. And if you don't get health insurance, you're going to get fined by the IRS. That's where I am. Yeah, I don't have an employer that offers it, and I refuse to participate in Obamacare. Call me stubborn, call me a rebel, call me whatever you want, but I'm daring the IRS to come force me to participate and buy a product I don't want to buy. Why should I subsidize somebody else's health care when I've always paid my own way? I've always had, before I was ever in elected office, I had my own business. And you know what? I insured myself. And when it came down to it, I paid cash for services. And I think we need to get back to that. I think it's the only way that we're actually going to see any return to sanity when it comes to healthcare. 323-746-TALK. We'll continue with your calls when we return. You are tuned to the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. We were working on playing you a clip earlier. It had some technical issues, but there was a debate Saturday night. Yeah, I know. I never heard anything about it from anyone. It was the quietest debate ever. I think the only action when it comes to these debates is on the Republican side, because once Hillary survived the first debate, once it was clear that the Democrats weren't going to take her to task, and by Democrats, I mean not only the Democrats on the stage, but the other Democrats on the stage known as moderators, the Democrats in the media, and their comments bore no resemblance to the implications. And we had a caller earlier, Dennis from Pinion Hills, who made a good point. We're going to work on getting that clip because I think it's fascinating. There is a political correctness that is like a disease. It strangles off common sense. It strangles the truth. And right now, you get to see. Read the comments, listen to the people, and look at the actions of those in power. On the Democrat side, you have Barack Obama, who says it's un-American not to accept more Syrian refugees. You have Barack Obama, and he said that in Turkey, in a Muslim country. He's lecturing Americans in a Muslim country that we need to open our heart to Muslim refugees who were, after all, fleeing terrorism in the Middle East. Well, you know what? Here's where I think most Americans fall. Most Americans are compassionate, they are open-minded, and they are generous. But we have limits. And if the terrorists want to kill people in France, and we now know that some of the terrorists, some of the Islamic jihadists who committed jihad, who committed mass murder in France, were refugees. They smuggled themselves in as refugees. And because we know that, you have states, by the way, run largely by Republicans, states like Texas, Alabama, Michigan, Indiana, and others who have told Obama, we are not taking any more of your refugees. Sorry, we refuse to accept them. Michigan Governor Rick Schneider, I lived in Michigan for a long time, and they have a large population from the Middle East, largely settled in Dearborn, which is a suburb of Detroit. Michigan Governor Rick Schneider said he wants to pause refugees coming into his state until screening procedures are reviewed by Department of Homeland Security. Good luck there, Rick. Michigan is a welcoming state. We are proud of our rich history of immigration, Schneider announced in a statement, but our first priority is protecting the safety of our residents. It's important. It's also important to remember that these attacks are the efforts of extremists and do not reflect the peaceful ways of the people of the Middle Eastern descent who are here and from around the world. Here's the thing. Guess who gets to suffer the consequences of the actions of the Islamic jihadists? Other Muslims. So you have Muslims who are trying to escape the Muslim extremists who just want to live another day, just want to get out of harm's way. They don't want to be involved. They don't want to engage. And so where are they? They're not going to get to come to Michigan or Texas or Alabama or Indiana, thanks to their terrorist cousins, basically. So yeah, there's consequences. And the Democrats don't think there should be any consequences except for Americans. We should feel bad, according to Madonna, because we don't love people enough, because we're unloving. It's all our fault. We're gonna play you that clip again, because I just want you to absorb the mindset of the left, where they don't think clear thoughts. And half the time you have no idea what they're talking about. But without any further ado, the Democrat debate clip.
So before we begin tonight's second debate with these candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination, we ask you to join us in observing a moment of silence.
I'm not that much of a socialist compared to Eisenhower.
You'll never hear this from that immigrant-bashing carnival barker, Donald Trump.
For the first time, a majority of my donors are women, 60%.
In 2008, you were portraying yourself as Annie Oakley and saying that we don't need those regulations.
This cannot be an American fight, although American leadership is essential.
I would argue that the disastrous invasion of Iraq has unraveled the region completely and led to the rise of Al-Qaeda and to ISIS.
I don't think that the United States has the bulk of the responsibility.
It's not just about getting rid of a single dictator. It is about understanding the secondary and third consequences that fall next.
That was one of the real contributions, despite all the other problems, that George W. Bush made after 9/11, when he basically said, after going to a mosque in Washington, we are not at war with Islam or Muslims. We are at war with violent extremism. If you go to 12, it would be the highest historical average we've ever had.
Yeah, but look, it should always be going up. I mean, with all due respect to Secretary Clinton, I think we need to stop taking our advice from economists on Wall Street and start taking advice.
Well, when we talk about Wall Street,
economists.
Wall Street's a good issue to talk about.
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
The business model of Wall Street is fraud. The Affordable Care Act is a step forward. I think we all support it. I believe we got to go further. I want to end the international embarrassment of the United States of America being the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people as a right, not a privilege.
And there's a significant difference that I have with Senator Sanders about how best to provide quality, affordable health care for everyone.
I want those kids to know that if they study hard, they do their homework, regardless of the income of their families, they will in fact be able to get a college education, because we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free.
I believe that actually affordable college, debt-free college, is the goal that we need to attain as a nation.
I disagree with free college for everybody. I don't think taxpayers should be paying to send Donald Trump's kids to college.
There is no challenge too great for the United States to confront, provided we have the ability and the courage to put forward new leadership that can move us to those better and safer and more prosperous states.
I think the president's job is to do everything possible, everything that she can do to lift up the people of this country.
We need a political revolution. Millions of people are going to have to stand up, turn off the TV, get involved in the political process.
It's funny to hear Bernie Sanders say that the business model of Wall Street is a fraud, but right after he just said he loves Obamacare and it's a good step forward. Obamacare is a fraud perpetuated by the government. If it was done by Wall Street, the president and everyone who had a hand in it would be in jail for the next 50 years. But then again, when government commits the fraud, when government acts as the mafia, Democrats applaud. And if you want more government, if you want government to solve every single problem that it creates and then create more government to solve the problems that it unintentionally created and then grow government even more and more and more. If you want to put government growth on steroids, vote for any four of those. I'm embarrassed by all of them, but this Martin O'Malley was pitched as this articulate, sort of middle, moderate Democrat. The guy just sounds like he's reading whenever he talks. He has no passion. At least Hillary's now putting some passion into her comments, and she said she's against college for all because she doesn't want to pay for Donald Trump's kids to go to college, which is a great way to go after your opponent and differentiate herself from the rest of the field. But in the end, here this debate takes place right after the terrorist attacks in Paris. And other than an opening moment of silence, it had very little impact on what anyone said. There was no one who rose to the occasion and came out and passionately defended freedom and condemned the Islamic terrorists, the Islamic fundamentalists, the Islamic extremists, whatever you want, as long as you put the word Islamic in there and be clear. And I agree with Hillary. We are not at war with Islam or Muslims. George W. Bush, who I don't like a whole lot, but I have to agree with him. We are not at war with a religion. But that religion is at war with us. That's just a fact. It is written right into their documents, right into their holy book, that they can kill the infidel and that it's acceptable to kill innocent and shed innocent blood in the name of wiping out those who don't believe. That's what they're doing. We can choose to ignore it. We can choose to put our head in the sand like most of the Democrats. Not all. I mean, Jim Webb, who was absent because he dropped out of the race, I'm sure he would have said something different. But they don't have a Jim Webb anymore. So you have a Democrat Party that, as Trevor Loudon said on this program last week, is much more, it has been hijacked by the Marxist progressives, those who are pushing socialism at every turn, who want government to control every aspect of your life, who want government to take virtually every penny of your earnings and turn it over to a government that knows best. So that's what you want. It really doesn't matter which one of these three you pick. It depends on which one has the best haircut and the nicest teeth that you can tolerate listening to for the next 4 or 8 years if the Republican Party does what it usually does, which is snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. We will snatch your phone calls from the ethersphere after this break. 323-746-TALK if you want to get in on the conversation. We'll be right back. We're going to go back to the phones. Hey, name and city. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I just hit the talk radio subject jackpot today. This is Bill again. I know I called before about the Paris thing, but after the lady came on about Obamacare, I have to make some comments on that because it's another one of my passions. I'm glad that my time got cut short on the other one so I could talk about this. And I was also very happy to hear what you said about not wanting to be involved with Obamacare. I have been trying to found an organization called the 16K Citizens Coalition Against Obamacare. And what that involves is it involves a minimum of 16,000 people in every community around the country that wants to participate, saying we will not subject ourselves to Obamacare. That's the practical side because there's strength in numbers. The symbolic side is that it's in direct opposition to the 16,000 extra IRS officials that Obama hired to try and enforce this thing.
I wondered if that 16,000 number had some significance like that. And by the way, you do know that they are armed with M16s they can own ammunition that is illegal for you to buy, Bill. And why is it that our government needs to force Americans to comply with something that is clearly, absolutely, and unequivocally unconstitutional? I don't care what the stupid Supreme Court said about it. That was all political. The bottom line is that when the government forces you to buy something and it does so against your will and it dictates you, that is not that is not anywhere near the country that was founded on freedom to defend and protect and secure our inalienable rights.
Well, here's. Am I still on?
You're still on. I'm just ranting.
Okay. Here's the important thing, Tim. The important thing is that they tell you have to subscribe to it, but what they have freely admitted now, if you look at the law very carefully, they cannot have any power to enforce the fine against you unless you are owed refunds. They can sanction your refund and they can keep that. If your tax structure is set up to where you don't get back any refund, you can just look them right in the face and say, I'm not going to do this. And they've admitted that there's not a darn thing that they can do as far as like coming with M16s or something to your house. That's one of the things that gives us more strength in this, and it's just a really crazy thing that they're trying to do this. So I say that we just break the damn thing and then go back to the private sector again with only minor regulation that just allows them not to gouge people on an individual corporate basis.
Nobody has explained to me why it is that when it comes to health care, we can't just pay cash. If we paid cash, we would have a much more efficient system. If the government is going to be involved, then it should give cash to the people who claim they need it based on their need and all that other stuff. Set up a health savings account like Dr. Ben Carson said. And look, if you waste your health care money on booze, too bad for you. You're going to die. That's the unintended consequence of your stupidity. But it doesn't constitute a burden for me that you're stupid. And I think that we got to get back to common sense. We've got to get back to markets that actually work. And when you have people holding the market accountable and they can go anywhere they want for competition on price, then all of a sudden prices will come down to whatever level they need to be at.
Exactly. And this goes back to our politically correct thing again and how the first subject ties in with the second subject. Everybody is so damn scared because of political correctness. Let me tell you something. On my Facebook page, I did a post about Obamacare a few months ago and the 16K Citizens Coalition. And I got absolutely no likes on it, and I got absolutely no comments on it. Yet I've worked in the movie industry, and I was in the original Planet of the Apes franchise. The other day, I posted a picture of myself in the chimp makeup, and it almost went viral. Everybody made comments and everything because, you see, that was safe, Tim. That was secure. But a controversial issue that got everybody so whipped into political correctness and into the fear of some sort of repercussion, nobody touched it. That was the hot potato on my Facebook page.
Well, Bill, that is America in 2015. People are terrified of giving their opinion because it can have real consequences. You could lose your job, you can lose friends, you can lose business contacts and clients and everything else. And I agree, that isn't the way it should be, but that is reality. And we never shy away from the controversial issues here at the Tim Donnelly Show. Bill, thank you for your call and for your ideas. And look, the bottom line is there's an age-old tradition, an American tradition called nullification. And if we nullify Obamacare by not complying, think about that. We have a government that cannot force enough Americans to comply. Remember, they tried it out there in that pasture in Nevada, and enough Americans showed up and showed them down by being armed, as is their right. And guess what? The government backed down and the government walked away. And that is the bottom line. We will be back after these messages with more of the Tim Donnelly Show. Stay tuned.
Just as I thought it was going on.
the time for all good Americans to wake up. The bottom line is, it doesn't really matter what your political persuasion is. It matters whether or not you love life. And if you love life, then you want a leader who will take action. It's that simple. Because if we don't take action, you're going to see what happened in France happen here. Now, there will be a big difference. Let's be clear, because while French President Francois Hollande, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, is going to or pushing for changes to the Constitution to allow the stripping of French citizenship from terrorists and would-be terrorists, I have a simple suggestion for him. Just, as from one peckerwood up in the hills with not enough guns to another, adopt America's Second Amendment. Take the exact same 26 words and make it your Second Amendment, or 16th or 20th or whatever. I don't know anything about the French Constitution, but I do believe that they need a change. Because here's the thing. If you're going to go into a public place and shoot it up, chances are in any public gathering, if you have a Second Amendment, if you have the ability to conceal carry, which we do here, and you have that ability, whether you have it sanctioned by the government or not, nobody would have argued. If somebody had pulled out a .45 and killed the main terrorists as they're shooting and slaughtering people, nobody would have cared whether they had a permit or not. I'm sure the leftists would have cared, but nobody would have listened to them. And the reality is, the government cannot protect you at all times. The reality is that we have limited government, even though it's not limited as severely and strictly as I would like in this country. But I don't want to grant massive new powers to our government. And I think most people don't want to grant massive new powers to our government. We did that after 9/11, and we have lived to regret it. We had the Patriot Act. We've had the TSA, the creation of the TSA, right out of the 9/11, that monolithic bill that had all kinds of pork in it. I don't know about you, but I don't feel any safer traveling with the TSA. Now, there was something they could have done. They could have created an actual intelligence agency and had them doing as they do in Israel, where they're surrounded by people who want to kill them at all times, and profile the behavior of those who are giving biofeedback that they have something to hide. That's what they do there. And everybody else gets treated well. And those who they profile, those who are suspicious, go through additional screening. It's that simple. And interrogation. But you base it on something. You don't just base it on this random notion that everyone is guilty and then treat everyone like garbage, which is what the TSA does. Not always. There's nice people. I have befriended people who work at TSA. I'm not demonizing all the people. I'm just saying the dictates from whoever's in command at TSA are followed blindly by people who have no regard or understanding of what they're doing half the time. But in the end, we are violating the Fourth Amendment right of every American, all because of 9/11. Because the terrorists, they won by diminishing the civil rights, the constitutional protections of Americans. That's simple. So now, in the aftermath of this latest tragedy, of these terrorist attacks in Paris, you have the Democrats moving in one direction, which is bury their heads in the sand, never utter the word Islamic, never say anything about Muslim extremists, always remove the word Muslim and Islam from any epithet. So it's just extremists, air quotes here. It's just radical, or it's jihadists, not Islamic jihadists. Not that there are any other kind of jihadists, but they want to be so careful not to ever be called an Islamophobe that they would rather people die than that they be called names. They would rather people die than that they call out evil for what it is. And look, if that's your thing, if you're a pacifist and you say, look, I don't ever want to engage with anyone, I want no confrontation, I do not want to call evil what it is, because then the evil might come and make me a target. No problem. You're free to live in America. I just don't want you to be my president. You are not a leader. You're a follower. You're somebody who has chosen a certain path, but it's not a path of a leader. We have chosen to live as a free people in this country. We owe our freedom in large part to the Second Amendment. And the reality of having a Second Amendment, the whole point is to enable every single citizen to defend their own lives, their property, and their freedom from tyranny. It's that simple. And I think the French, in celebration of our independence, they gave us the Statue of Liberty. I think we should give them the Second Amendment. I can't think of a single more effective way. And believe me, they're talking about it over there. They're having a real conversation about whether or not they want to be armed, because obviously when you have gun-free zones, when the entire citizenry is unarmed, when the police are unarmed, and you have a handful of evildoers, they're not criminals, they're evildoers. They are evil mass murderers who have no conscience, by the way. Or they've had their conscience completely blotted out by their zealous following of this false religion. And in the end, they are committing murder in the name of Allah, who they call the God of peace. They're committing murder if you don't believe as vehemently, as zealously as they do. If you are not politically correct in your insanity, I don't know what else to call it, then they have the right to kill you. And they will. This is not, there's no stopping them. They don't see the sea of humanity that they went into slaughter. They don't see them as people, as human beings. They see them as objects. They have had their minds so warped by this so-called religion that for them, they are doing God's will, and they are slaughtering the infidel, not the innocent, the infidel. And somehow you're a threat to their faith because you exist, because you're at a concert, because you're having fun, because you're at a soccer match, because you're at a restaurant enjoying, because you're having fun and enjoying life. You're a threat to their religion, and they have a right to kill you. Well, I don't think they understand the sleeping giant that they have awoken in the Western world. But we are better, faster, and more accurate than anyone on the planet. We have waged war. We don't like war. We prefer to be at peace. But once you engage us, I can't even say on air what I want to say, but just read my mind. Once you engage us, you better look the blank out, because we're coming and we will be ready. So when you bring that crap here to the United States, you'll get a 45 hollow point to the head. before you can even say Allahu Akbar and all the other crap that you want to say while you're trying to convert people to your religion of hate. 323-746-TALK. We will return after these messages. Hey, welcome back to the show. We're going to go to the phone, see what you think about this whole subject of the Second Amendment. I just want to share. You know, France gave us not the Eiffel Tower, the Statue of Liberty, and I want to give them the Second Amendment. Hey, welcome to the show. Give me your name, first name, and city.
Hey, Tim, it's Jonathan in Apple Valley.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, but I was enjoying your show. I thought I'd give you a call in.
Yeah. So what do you think about this?
Well, as you may or may not know, Tim, I used to live in France, and back in the 80s, you could actually set your clock, to the bombings that would go off. But back then, the bombings that were happening in Paris would take place after hours, after business hours, when people had left the buildings predominantly. And those buildings were owned frankly, by Jews. And they were really after, scaring people from going into these stores and bringing commerce. And it was less about killing people and more about terrorizing people to do commerce with anybody of the Jewish faith.
So there was some semblance, though, of respect for human life, in that they were waiting until the vast majority of people had left, and not like what you're seeing now.
Oh yeah, now it's crazy. But looking at what just happened, bringing the Second Amendment to France. I mean, there are guns, and cops do have guns. Guns not like England that way. But what's really scary is the idea that that only guns are going to be the solution. I mean, look, you and I are both gun owners. My point is, France is going to have to go through years and years of having to let these people into their country to see if deportation is going to actually be effective. I mean, here we are bringing more and more Syrians into our state now, and what scrutiny are we going to put them under? I think our governor is really irresponsible in what he's doing, and it's the cities like Sacramento and San Diego that already have Syrian refugees that might be a good example of what's going to happen in terms of identifying what their past is, and are they going back to Syria?
Well,
I
thought one solution that made a certain amount of sense. It was a reasonable solution proffered by a caller earlier today, that we disallow anyone who is a male between the ages of 15 and 50, and that way take out the vast majority of the terrorist population, and only allow women, children, and basically old men or very, very young, which might make a certain amount of sense. But right now, I would like to stop all immigration of Muslims into this country, period, until we can come up with something that makes sense, because this is a recipe for disaster, especially if we spread these populations in little pockets throughout communities all over this country.
Well, and there's a lot of other countries that should be and could be in a position to take them in, which are frankly Muslim countries. I mean, it just doesn't have to be to non-Muslim countries to care for refugees in a time of problems. And we have other refugees that we haven't received. I mean, think of all the Christian refugees from countries like Syria, whom maybe it's even too late for many of them. They've been murdered and are being murdered even as we speak. But there's other countries that can take refugees. And while other countries are, I'm just saying there's Muslim countries, Islamic countries that are certainly able to take these people, as well as countries like America or other countries like Canada or France.
Well, yeah, you have some very, very wealthy countries around the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, that could clearly take a tremendous number of these refugees, but they haven't.
And why not?
I think it's a good question. I think it's a question that while Obama is busy dancing around the word Islam and doesn't want to indict Muslims for what Muslims have done, I don't know, maybe he could go have John Kerry go over there, or he could take a detour from Turkey, stop by, talk to, the Saudi Arabians about, and say, hey, what's up?
Well, at least burden the equal share at a minimum. But the vetting is the big deal for the.
You're way too reasonable, Jonathan. You're way too reasonable. I'm not in a reasonable mood today. I'm just not. I want to arm the French to the teeth so they can be like Americans. I bet you if enough of us went over there and said, look, you haven't had a tremendous familiarity with firearms. Maybe you've been scared of them. We want to help you. I think that we would be well received.
Yeah, I mean, I still today to this family and friends that both live there, and they both want to be armed, or I should say, they all want to be armed. Actually, some people, a friend of mine that works in the Interior Ministry in France, and of course they are armed. And I've seen the riot police. They're CRS is what they're called, and then they have their SWAT version is called RAID, RAID, which is a rapid deployment team. And they're very effective. Don't think that the French aren't.
No, I don't. I'm not discounting French law enforcement whatsoever. What I'm saying is they do not have a culture like we have here. It is not ingrained in them. If you tried to do what happened here, there would likely be a very different result, because I know at least 10 people everywhere I go who are armed all the time, regardless, and they would have acted, at least one of them. So, and that's something that the police can never do. The police can't respond if they're not present. You have to be present there in that instant and take action in that instant. That's the reality. And to me, that's the quickest, most expedient thing that all of us can do. I'm not just talking about France. We all of Europe and all of Western civilization, every American ought to take their Second Amendment right a hell of a lot more seriously since what happened in France.
Well, I'm with you 100%. And things like, incidents where you're highly motivated to become a person that would go out and get their concealed carry permit. And I feel very highly motivated to get that now done in my life. And up to this point, I felt like, I'm okay. I can take care of myself. But the fact is, like you mentioned earlier, the government cannot protect everybody all the time, and nor should we even expect that. I'm much more of a proactive, I'll take care of myself kind of guy.
Yeah, it's not even a desirable condition in reality, because it's antithetical to freedom. Hate to use big words like that, but it basically erodes freedom when you give the government too much power and the expectation of them to take care of us.
Exactly. We don't want to empower them any more than they're taking. So, there's something else I wanted to bring up too. I mean, because this has been a good conversation.
You've got about 10 seconds.
Okay, I'll leave it this. It was the French, Lafayette, who gave us the Navy that helped us beat the British in our Revolutionary War. So we do owe something to the French.
Oh, I agree. Jonathan, by the way, thanks for the call.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you soon, then.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. Hey, couldn't have summed it up better than Jonathan from Apple Valley. We'll be right back after these messages. Obama says it's un-American to reject more Syrian Muslim refugees. What say you? 323-746-TALK. Madonna says we just need to love them. We just need more understanding and peace, and we just need to embrace that which is different. And if we would just treat people with dignity and respect, this would all end. I think she missed the memo on jihad. I don't think she understands jihad. Jihad doesn't care if you're nice. Jihad doesn't care if you have good hair. Jihad doesn't care if you're a faithful Christian or faithful Jew or faithful to whatever your faith is, jihad only cares that you are an infidel. Now, what is the crime of being an infidel? It means that you do not believe as the jihadist believes. And therefore, it is acceptable, and indeed, it is rewarded. You always hear about the 72 virgins, but you will be rewarded in the Muslim faith, in the world of Allah. You will be rewarded for dispatching infidels from this earth. And in fact, if you die along with the innocent blood that you have shed, then you get treated to 72 virgins. So I guess it's pretty much only men that are going to be doing this. But it is un-American to want to protect America, according to Barack Obama. He stated in another interview that he didn't have time to debate Republicans on Islamic terror, and that leaders shouldn't just pop off. Well, you know what, Obama? You pop off all the time when a black person is killed by a white person that you can then demonize and stereotype and use as fodder and use as an Alinsky opportunity to further weaken and infringe the Second Amendment of all Americans. You pop off all the time when there's a crime, an individual crime. You've got the president of a country of 310 million people who refuses to engage when it comes to global jihad, this Islamic jihadist crusade that is being waged by ISIS and others and their sympathizers, and they're growing. He says, no, it's contained. There's no reason to even talk about it. We're never going to use the words Islamic or Muslim. We're just going to call it extremism, and you know what? It's contained, so I'm just going to move on. What's next? So he won't pop off on a major global issue that affects the very lives of Western civilization and the survival of Western civilization. But if a young black man is involved in any kind of an altercation with police, Obama could care less about the facts, doesn't wait for the facts, jumps on television, demands an interview, and shoots his mouth off. But God forbid that he pop off about the Islamic jihadist crusade against Western civilization. And mark my words, the Syrian refugee crisis was simply a Trojan horse. And yes, there were legitimate refugees mixed in. There were displaced people. There were people who are terrified of their own Muslim cousins, the jihadists, because not all Muslims are jihadists, even though Islam is the only faith that allows it written right into their so-called holy book. You don't have that in Christianity, even though Christians waged the Crusades against Islam. That was never allowed within the scriptures. As a matter of fact, the opposite is what is allowed. Turn the other cheek and forgive. And those concepts are foreign. And I'm sorry, Madonna, but you can't love them. You can't love them out of their hatred and their zealotry and their insanity. It's as if we see every television show now on seems to have zombies in it. There's zombie games. My kids are always killing zombies on the Call of Duty or whatever it used to be. It's now zombies, zombie apocalypse and all this. Walking Dead. If you don't shoot them in the head, they come after you and they eat you or suck the life out of you or whatever they do. That's what these Islamic jihadists are like. You can't sit there and reason with them. You can't give them a hug and expect that somehow they're going to change their mind about committing mass murder against you and your loved ones and all kinds of other innocents who might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So my suggestion is a very simple one. I know the president of France immediately took action, unlike Obama. He did several things. He sent war fighters to annihilate an ISIS training camp. He called an emergency meeting of his Congress at Versailles, and he suggested we need to change the Constitution so that we can throw these people out of the country that are hell-bent on jihad. And he did that among many other things, but I agree with Jonathan of Apple Valley. We owe the French. They were there for us during our revolution when nobody else would be. And right now, the French need us. Because the Second Amendment, firearms, that's a foreign concept to most French. Yes, the cops, yes, they have special forces, and yes, they have very brave individuals who serve in many of their law enforcement and military agencies. Absolutely. But that's never enough. You have to arm the citizenry because this is a war that will be fought on the front lines with average people. This was not fought on a battleground. They turned a restaurant and a football stadium, well, they call it football over there, a soccer stadium, and a music venue. They turned that into the battleground. As a matter of fact, we may have on tomorrow, if we can get him, a friend of mine who's friends with two of the musicians who were there. One of them was taken hostage at one of the venues where these atrocities happened. I mean, I can't even imagine. Here you are, 1 minute you're playing your electric guitar, and having fun playing metal music, and it was actually a California band called Eagle of Death, and they play heavy metal. Surprise, surprise. And yeah, Eagles of Death. Excuse me. Over 100 hostages were taken in that scenario. Look, this is no joke. This is your life. This is your future in a world where we have treated the threat of Islamic jihadists the same as at one time the world treated the threat of Nazi Germany under Hitler. There was a time when everybody just wanted to look away, when they had a bumbling fool instead of a leader named Neville Chamberlain, who thought he could have peace in our time, who thought he could negotiate with evil. He thought he could love evil. He thought evil would go away. Instead, evil invaded Poland and began systematically annihilating the Jewish population, going through the ghettos with what are called pogroms, and killing Jews and gypsies and anyone else who didn't live up to the standards of the Nazis. That's the bottom line. And it's horrific for anyone to even think of it. And yet it happened. It happened in a place where people had lost any right to defend themselves. They had their guns confiscated. And it is time that we recognize that one of the prices of freedom is risk. It's danger. Living free is dangerous. It's risky. And we all have to accept that risk. In Israel, every single individual, man, woman, who is of age is a soldier. They are considered to be a frontline soldier. Whether they are walking around with arms or not, they are considered to be a soldier. I think we need to take that mentality. And with that mentality, we will then be prepared. And you don't have to have a gun to be prepared to fight. It's just my preferred tool, especially when you know those who are hell-bent on evil are going to have a gun capable of firing way more rounds than are legal in California. And you have a government here that wants to handicap you in defending your own life. You know, I think we need to tell Gavin Newsom and his ilk, you guys can F off with your gun control. You can go shove it, because we're not going to have any of it. And we don't give a crap. You can pass all the stupid laws you want, Gavin Newsom. We will not be abiding them. We will not put our family at risk to make you feel good about yourself. If you want to feel good about yourself, go look in the mirror and do one of those Saturday Night Live skits and talk to yourself. But you're not going to take away my rights. You're not going to take away my natural right to defend myself and my loved ones and my freedom. So you can go pound sand, pass all the laws you want. I simply will nullify them in the name of freedom. And before I get myself in any more trouble, I'm going to take a quick break. Final break. If you have anything to say, you better call in quick. 323-746-TALK before we run out of time. Hey, you've got to wonder, when it takes something like the terrorist attacks in Paris to wake people up, but there is a massive awakening taking place across Europe. You have a right-wing candidate whose name is Marine Le Pen, who has demanded and called for closing the borders, not allowing any more immigration from the Islamic states. And of course, that's not going to be enough, because you've got terrorists already inside the gates. So how France will address this will be viewed and watched with interest from around the world. But at least they're having the conversation. The people are taking to the streets in massive protests. The newspapers call them Islamophobic. Well, maybe they are. Maybe they are afraid of people whose religion gives them the right to murder you. I mean, think about that. I mean, put it in the context of your faith walk. So you got some people that go to church 7 times a week. And if the people who go to church 7 times a week don't like the fact that you only go once, or you only go on Christmas or Easter, or once a month, or whatever it is, and they decide that it is their duty to kill you and to kill everyone else and anyone else around you because you're not as crazy about religion as they are. We would never tolerate that here. But when it's Islam, then people talk in hushed tones. Then you have an entire lobbying wing called the CAIR, CAIR. I forget what the heck it stands for, but it basically is the lobbying wing of the Islamic community worldwide. And anyone who ever says anything about Islam is put on their hate watch list. I'm sure I'm on their hate watch list because I speak the truth. And the truth is that theirs is the only religion, theirs is the only quote unquote faith that authorizes assassination of unbelievers. I don't know. Have I said it any, can I say it any clearer? Christianity does not authorize the murder of those who don't believe. You have free will. Remember the scene with Jesus on the cross, and on one side, he has criminals on both sides of him, men who have been convicted and sentenced to death. And one of them acknowledges that Jesus is innocent, and sees that he's the Son of God and begs forgiveness for his sins, admits his own guilt, and asks that he be able to be in paradise with him. And Jesus grants that. And the other guy stays resolute in his sin. Well, he has that choice. He makes the choice. One goes to heaven, one goes to hell. Now, imagine in your modern day life walking around and trying to figure out who is zealous enough that you don't need to kill them. I mean, it's ludicrous. This is primordial. These are notions that maybe in 1,000 years ago they might have been understandable. But in our modern society, this is a full-blown assault by savages against civilized society. It is an assault on Western civilization by the 14th century. And my prescription is simple. We need to prepare ourselves mentally. We need to arm ourselves and be prepared at all times as Americans, as freedom lovers, to not only defend our lives, but to defend the innocent who have not taken those steps. And I believe that we not only should pray for France, not only should pray for the people and their leaders, but we should send a contingent of Americans over there to introduce the Second Amendment and help them defend themselves. Sadly, we are out of time. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless you and God speed. Tim Donnelly Show out.